Long Island once shimmered with palatial estates that rivaled the greatest palaces of Europe. Imagine, if you will, driving along winding country roads, where every few miles you would encounter iron gates opening onto tree-lined drives that stretched for half a mile or more. Rolling hills covered in manicured lawns, lush forests carefully maintained by armies of gardeners, and sweeping waterfront views that stretched to the horizon. This was the landscape that drew America's wealthiest families to build some of the most extraordinary homes ever constructed in this country. From the western tip near Queens all the way to the Hamptons at the eastern end, across 118 miles of this narrow island, hundreds of massive estates rose during what we now call the Gilded Age. Between the late 1800s and the early 1900s, the region experienced an unprecedented surge of construction, a building boom unlike anything America had seen before or has seen since. What drove this extraordinary period of mansion building? Several factors converged to create the perfect conditions. First, American industry was booming. The Industrial Revolution had created entirely new categories of wealth. Fortunes were being made in steel, railroads, oil, shipping, banking, and dozens of other industries. Men who had started with nothing were suddenly worth tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars, the equivalent of billions today. Second, the Long Island Railroad had extended its lines throughout the island, dramatically shortening travel times from Manhattan. What had once been a full day's journey by horse and carriage could now be accomplished in under an hour by train. Wealthy New Yorkers could maintain their business interests in the city while enjoying country estates on Long Island. They could live like English aristocracy while remaining close to the commercial heart of America. Third, Long Island itself offered something unique: proximity to New York City combined with genuine natural beauty. The island featured diverse topography, sandy beaches, rocky shores, rolling hills, dense forests, and picturesque harbors. Unlike the flat plains of the Midwest or the harsh winters of upstate New York, Long Island offered a temperate climate and stunning vistas. The North Shore, in particular, with its views across Long Island Sound, became known as the Gold Coast, America's answer to the French Riviera. Fourth, there was a social imperative among the newly wealthy. The Industrial Revolution had minted a new class of millionaires, but many of them came from modest backgrounds. They were self-made men who had clawed their way to the top. Building a magnificent estate wasn't just about having a nice place to live, it was about establishing legitimacy, about proving you belonged among America's elite. Your mansion was your calling card, your statement to the world that you had arrived. Between 1990 and 1930, the period we're focusing on today, it's estimated that over 600 significant estates were built on Long Island. Not modest country houses, we're talking about mansions with 40, 50, 60, or even 80 rooms. Houses with 30,000, 50,000, or even 80,000 square feet of living space. Estates with hundreds of acres of manicured grounds, complete with formal gardens, greenhouses, stables, garages for a dozen automobiles, servants' quarters, and every amenity imaginable. Where lavish soirees once filled ballrooms with hundreds of guests dressed in the finest fashions from Paris, where orchestras played late into the night, where champagne flowed and deals worth millions were struck over cigars and brandy. Today, subdivisions and suburban streets fill the landscape. Strip malls occupy land where marble fountains once sparkled. Ranch houses from the 1960s sit on lots carved from estates that once stretched for 1,000 acres. Hi everyone. In this extended journey, we'll step back into that golden era and tour 9 of the most extraordinary mansions in exhaustive detail. We'll explore not just the houses themselves, but the lives of the people who built them, the social world they inhabited, and the forces that led to their ultimate destruction. We'll walk through rooms that no longer exist, gardens that have vanished, and try to understand what it meant to live at the absolute pinnacle of American wealth and privilege. Feel free to leave comments as we go through each mansion. I love hearing your thoughts, your questions, and your own connections to these lost places. Without further ado, let's uncover what these palaces were truly like and discover how and why they vanished in this special extended episode of This House. Historical context. Before wealthy heirs and captains of industry converged on Long Island to build their dream estates, much of the island was something entirely different. Let's take a moment to understand what Long Island looked like before the Gold Coast era began. In the early 1800s, Long Island was primarily agricultural land dotted with modest farmhouses. The soil, while not as rich as the farmland of the Midwest, was adequate for growing potatoes, raising dairy cattle, and cultivating vegetables for the New York City market. Small villages existed, places like Glen Cove, Oyster Bay, Great Neck, and Southampton, but these were working communities of farmers, fishermen, and tradespeople, not playgrounds for the wealthy. The transformation began after the Civil War, which ended in 1865. The war had accelerated American industrialization at an unprecedented pace. The North's victory had been in large part to its superior industrial capacity, its ability to produce weapons, ammunition, uniforms, and supplies in vast quantities. After the war, that industrial machinery didn't disappear. It simply turned to peacetime production. The period from 1865 to 1900 saw explosive industrial growth. Railroad companies laid thousands of miles of track connecting every corner of the nation. Steel mills in Pittsburgh churned out girders and rails. Oil refineries in Pennsylvania and Texas processed petroleum into kerosene for lamps, and later gasoline for the new horseless carriages. Banks financed all of this expansion, growing wealthy on the interest and fees. This period also saw the rise of what we might call the first modern corporations. Before the Civil War, most businesses were relatively small: a single factory, a local bank, a regional railroad. After the war, businesses began to consolidate and expand. John D. Rockefeller created Standard Oil by buying up or driving out competitors until he controlled roughly 90% of America's oil refining capacity. Andrew Carnegie did the same with steel. J.P. Morgan consolidated railroads and eventually formed U.S. Steel, the world's first billion-dollar corporation. These industrial titans and the men who worked with them, the executives, the lawyers, the bankers, the investors, became extraordinarily wealthy. But where would they live? Manhattan was crowded, dirty, and increasingly industrial. The wealthy had always maintained country estates, but previously these had been relatively modest affairs, large houses certainly, but not palaces. The Long Island Railroad changed everything. Originally chartered in 1834, the railroad had struggled financially for decades. But in the 1870s and 1880s, under new management and with new capital investment, the railroad expanded its network throughout Long Island. By 1900, you could travel from Manhattan to various points on Long Island in 30 to 90 minutes, depending on your destination. This connectivity was crucial. Wealthy businessmen could now enjoy country living without sacrificing their work in the city. They could spend Monday through Friday in Manhattan, then retreat to their Long Island estates for long weekends. Or they could live on Long Island year-round and commute into the city as needed. Some even had private rail cars that could be coupled to regular trains, allowing them to travel in luxury. As New York City's population exploded after the Civil War, growing from less than 1 million people in 1860 to over 3 million by 1900, the city became increasingly congested and unpleasant for the wealthy. The picturesque coastline of Long Island, just a short train ride away, offered an obvious solution. The newly wealthy also faced a social challenge. The old money families of New York, the Astors, the Livingstons, the Van Rensselaers, looked down on these nouveaux riches. Yes, you might have more money than the Astors, but your grandfather had been a poor immigrant or a struggling farmer, while their ancestors had been wealthy for generations. The old money controlled New York society through institutions like the Mrs. Astor's famous 400, the list of people deemed acceptable to invite to the most exclusive social events. Building a magnificent estate became a way to establish legitimacy. If you could construct a home that rivaled or exceeded the great houses of Europe, if you could entertain in a style that matched or surpassed the old money families, then perhaps you could force your way into society's upper ranks. And if the old New York families wouldn't accept you, well, you could create your own society on Long Island. By the early 1900s, families like the Morgans, Vanderbilts, and Guggenheims had transformed parts of Long Island into a playground for the ultra-wealthy. The North Shore, in particular, the area facing Long Island Sound, became known as the Gold Coast. Here, estate after estate stretched along the waterfront. On summer evenings, you could stand on one mansion's terrace and see the lights of neighboring estates twinkling through the trees. Architects found themselves overwhelmed with commissions. Firms like McKim, Mead & White, which had designed some of New York's most important buildings, including the original Pennsylvania Station, were called upon to create dream residences. C.P.H. Gilbert, who specialized in Beaux Arts mansions, had a waiting list of wealthy clients. Landscape architects like the Olmsted brothers, whose father had designed Central Park, were hired to transform raw land into park-like settings with careful plantings, winding paths, and stunning vistas. The styles varied widely based on the tastes and backgrounds of the owners. Some preferred French Renaissance chateaux with elaborate stonework and formal gardens. Others wanted Italian Renaissance villas with terracotta tiles and loggia overlooking the water. Still others chose Tudor Revival with half-timbering and leaded glass windows, or Georgian Revival with red brick and white columns. But whatever the style, these were not modest homes. They were palaces, pure and simple. Vast fortunes built these estates. A typical Gold Coast mansion might cost anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million to construct. Remember, this is in 2020 dollars, when the average American worker earned perhaps $500 per year. Adjusted for inflation, these houses cost the equivalent of $50 million to $200 million in today's money, and that's just the construction cost. Furnishing them with European antiques, maintaining armies of servants, and keeping up the grounds could easily cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. Though each mansion was unique, reflecting the personality and tastes of its owner, they shared certain features. Imposing facades announced the owner's wealth and status from the moment you approached. Impeccable gardens, often designed by the most renowned landscape architects in America, transformed hundreds of acres into carefully composed scenes of natural beauty. And endless staff, dozens or even hundreds of servants, kept these vast establishments running smoothly. Yet in just a few short decades, almost all of them vanished. Today, of the more than 600 significant estates built during the Gold Coast era, fewer than 100 survive in any form, and many of those have been converted to museums, schools, or other institutional uses. The rest were demolished, subdivided, and erased from the landscape. How did this happen? What forces led to the destruction of so much wealth, beauty, and craftsmanship? We'll explore those questions as we tour these lost palaces. But first, let's start our journey with one of the most magnificent of all, Captain Delamar's Pembroke in Glen Cove. Pembroke, Captain Delamar's Palace. Joseph Raphael Delamar's life reads like an adventure novel, the kind of improbable story that would be rejected by publishers as too far-fetched if it were fiction. But it's all true, and his extraordinary life led him to build one of the most spectacular mansions in American history. Born in 1843 to a prominent Dutch Jewish family in Amsterdam, Joseph's childhood was marked by tragedy. His father died when Joseph was only 4 years old, leaving his mother to raise him alone. The young boy proved difficult to manage. Restless, adventurous, and rebellious, he chafed under his mother's attempts to give him a conventional education and prepare him for a respectable career. At age 11, Joseph ran away from home and went to sea. Think about that for a moment. An 11-year-old boy from a good family in Amsterdam running away to become a sailor. He worked on merchant ships, learning to navigate by the stars, to read the weather, and to survive in the harsh world of 19th-century maritime commerce. But Joseph Delamar wasn't content with an ordinary sailor's life. As a young man, he gravitated toward adventure and danger. During the American Civil War, he was diving for shipwrecks off the coast, not out of historical interest, but to salvage valuable cargo from sunken Confederate and Union vessels. This was dangerous, difficult work, but it could be extremely lucrative if you knew where to look and weren't afraid of the risks. Later, Delamar traveled to Africa, where he engaged in what can only be described as piracy and looting. He traveled rivers in a boat equipped with cannons, raiding villages and taking whatever valuables he could find. By any modern standard, this was criminal behavior, but in the chaotic colonial Africa of the 1960s and 1970s, European and American adventurers operated with relative impunity. Delamar made considerable money from these expeditions, though he also made enemies and developed a reputation as a ruthless operator. His greatest fortune, however, came from mining. In the 1870s and 1880s, Delamar went west to the American frontier, where gold and silver rushes were creating overnight millionaires. He had a knack for identifying promising mining sites, for organizing the labor and capital needed to extract ore, and for selling his operations at exactly the right moment. He struck it big in Colorado, then again in Idaho, and then in Nevada. By the 1890s, Delamar had transformed from a pirate and adventurer into a respected mining magnate. He owned or controlled dozens of mines across the American West. He employed thousands of workers. He was worth tens of millions of dollars, a truly staggering fortune for that era. By the 1910s, as Delamar approached his 70s, he had become one of America's wealthiest men. The orphaned stowaway who had run away to sea at age 11 now moved in the highest circles of New York society. But he still lacked something that old money families possessed, a truly magnificent estate that would establish his place among America's aristocracy. In 1910 or 1911, Delamar purchased 47 acres of prime land on Long Island's Gold Coast in Glen Cove. This wasn't just any land. It occupied one of the highest points in the area, with commanding views over Long Island Sound. From this site, you could see for miles in every direction. Delamar hired C.P.H. Gilbert to design his mansion. Gilbert was one of the premier architects of the Gilded Age, known for his Beaux Arts mansions in Manhattan and his grand country estates. Gilbert understood exactly what Delamar wanted, not just a house, but an American palace that would rival anything in Europe. Construction began around 1913 and took approximately 3 years. When completed in 1916, Pembroke stood as one of the largest homes ever built in the United States. 60,000 square feet of living space spread across multiple floors. To put this in perspective, that's larger than most apartment buildings. The White House, by comparison, has about 55,000 square feet of floor space. Delamar's private residence was bigger than the home of the President of the United States. To begin exploring this colossal estate, imagine we're pulling up to the front gate. Even the gate itself makes a statement: elaborate ironwork suspended between massive stone pillars. As the gates swing open, we begin making our way up the drive.
The drive doesn't go directly to the house. That would be too simple, too ordinary. Instead, it winds through the property, giving visitors time to appreciate the scale and grandeur of the estate. Every inch of the driveway has been professionally landscaped with hundreds of species of flowering plants. Dozens of full-time gardeners maintain these plantings, ensuring that something is always in bloom, that every view is picture-perfect. The Beaux Arts-style mansion was clad entirely in limestone, not just any limestone, but carefully selected blocks with consistent color and texture. The facade was complemented by rows of ornate balustrade, decorative stone railings that lined terraces and balconies. No surface of the mansion was left untouched by the masterful hands of stonemasons and artists. Carved details appeared everywhere: garlands of flowers, classical urns, medallions bearing Delamar's initials, allegorical figures representing commerce and industry. Furthermore, the grounds weren't just spectacular, they were engineered. The earth had been rammed and terraced to form artificial hills, pushing the mansion upwards to tower over Glen Cove as its crown jewel of architectural splendor. From the town below, Pembroke appeared to float above the treetops, its pale limestone glowing in the sunlight. Even if you were to bypass the drive and arrive by boat, the mansion was designed to impress. The long horizontal frieze between the first and second floors, decorated with classical motifs, mirrored the parallel shoreline below, creating a visual harmony between architecture and landscape. Let's imagine arriving by water. We'll dock our boat on the pier, which extends out into Long Island Sound. A carriage is waiting to pick us up and take us to the house. But first, we'll travel past the bathing pavilion, a classical structure with changing rooms, showers, and a covered veranda where guests could relax after swimming. Then we wind around the Japanese gardens. These were extremely fashionable in the early 1900s, inspired by the opening of Japan to Western trade and the Japanese pavilions at various world's fairs. Delamar's Japanese garden featured carefully placed rocks, a koi pond, stone lanterns imported from Japan, and miniature trees pruned in the bonsai style. The only thing breaking our immersion in this oriental fantasy is the 70-foot private water tower rising in the distance, a necessary but not particularly beautiful reminder that even a palace requires infrastructure. Finally, we arrive at the sunken garden, the only thing now between us and the house. This formal garden sits below the main grade, with stone steps leading down into a rectangular space filled with geometric beds of roses, surrounded by neatly trimmed boxwood hedges. Butterflies flutter among the lilacs and rose bushes, which have been planted and pruned to be perfectly symmetrical from the garden path. Let's now pass below the main veranda and begin making our way inside, moving through the vestibule to arrive in the stair hall. Entering the mansion through massive bronze doors, we find that it is every bit as grand inside as out. The limestone-clad stair hall welcomes us with soaring ceilings and a grand staircase that sweeps upward in a graceful curve. Overhead, an elaborate plaster ceiling features classical motifs, acanthus leaves, scrollwork, and painted panels depicting mythological scenes. Directly ahead, continuing in opulence, the living hall acts as the grand reception room where visitors would wait to be announced to the host. This was standard practice in Gilded Age mansions. You didn't just walk in and start exploring. A butler would greet you in the living hall, take your coat and hat, and inform Mr. Delamar of your arrival. You might wait here for 5 minutes or 30, depending on your importance and Delamar's mood. While we wait, we can begin looking around, peering into other rooms in anticipation of what comes next. Through one doorway, we can glimpse the dining room, through another, the den. Each room visible from the living hall offers a tantalizing preview of the splendors within. The dining room erupts with an assemblage of cultural treasures. Wall murals spanning from floor to ceiling depict elaborate scenes, perhaps a royal hunt in medieval France or a harvest festival in Renaissance Italy. These murals are painted directly on the walls by skilled artists, many of whom had trained in European academies. The space between the murals is filled with salvaged European wall panels, actual 17th or 18th century woodwork purchased from French or Italian palaces and shipped across the Atlantic. A gilded cornice runs around the walls, catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. The space is further decorated with antiques spanning centuries and regions apart, a Roman marble bust on one pedestal, a Chinese porcelain vase on another, Renaissance bronze candlesticks on the dining table. All of this is anchored by an antique Persian rug that might be 200 years old, its colors still vibrant, its intricate patterns perfectly complementing the room's decor. The dining room itself could seat 30 or 40 guests. Made of polished mahogany, it stretches nearly the length of the room. When set for a formal dinner with multiple courses, each place setting might include a dozen different pieces, multiple forks, knives, spoons, wine glasses, water glasses, finger bowls. Servants would stand along the walls, ready to serve each course, refill glasses, and respond to any guest's needs. To the other end of the living hall, the den offers a completely different atmosphere. This is staged with overstuffed leather furniture, providing a comfortable place for Delamar to carry on long conversations over cigars. Dark wood paneling covers the walls. A massive fireplace with an elaborately carved mantel dominates one wall. Built-in bookcases hold leather-bound volumes. This is a masculine space where business deals might be discussed, where men could retreat after dinner while the ladies withdrew to the drawing room. From here, the formal elements of the home begin to relax as we enter the billiards room. This sizable room contains not just the billiards table, but comfortable seating arranged around the perimeter. Delamar and his male guests could play billiards, smoke, drink brandy, and talk late into the night. The walls might be decorated with hunting trophies or maritime paintings, reminders of Delamar's adventurous past. We realize at this point that one of the largest and most expensive homes in America was designed primarily for relaxing with a small group of friends. Despite the enormous scale and the lavish decoration, Pembroke was fundamentally a comfortable home where Delamar could enjoy his wealth in the company of people he liked. Not only does the house contain a billiards room, but there is an entire indoor tennis court concealed behind its facade. This wasn't a common amenity even among the ultra-wealthy. Few Gold Coast estates featured indoor tennis courts. The court would allow Delamar and his guests to play regardless of weather, maintaining their exercise and recreation schedules even during Long Island's cold winters or rainy springs. But perhaps the most spectacular space lies at the end of the long corridor. Wrapped in columns with floor-to-ceiling windows, the adjoining tropical house was the showstopper of the entire estate. This entire wing of the house was designed as an indoor tropical oasis, going far beyond a conventional greenhouse to include a circular indoor swimming pool. Imagine stepping from the main house, perhaps on a snowy January afternoon, into this humid, plant-filled space. Palm trees grow toward the glass ceiling. Orchids bloom in carefully maintained beds. The air is warm and moist, scented with exotic flowers. In the very center, you could cross an ornate bridge and enjoy the humid air from a pagoda that appears to float on the water. The swimming pool itself is lined with colorful tiles and surrounded by tropical plants.
This was Delamar's private water park, a place where he could swim in warm water, surrounded by lush vegetation, even in the depths of winter. Delamar's indoor tropical paradise made headlines in various architectural publications of the time. Architecture magazines ran illustrated features showing the intricate details of the space. Society columns described the elaborate swimming parties Delamar hosted. This caused a cascade of similar rooms to be built for other super-wealthy individuals. Suddenly, everyone on the Gold Coast wanted their own tropical conservatory or indoor pool. Tragically, Captain Delamar didn't get to enjoy his palace for long. Not even 2 years after Pembroke had been finished, he suddenly and fatally contracted pneumonia, leaving his mansion to his daughter Alice in 1918. He was 75 years old. After spending his youth adventuring around the world, surviving piracy, diving shipwrecks, mining in the dangerous American West, he died of pneumonia in his Long Island mansion. Pembroke was then placed up for sale. Finding a buyer for a 60,000 square foot mansion was challenging, even among the wealthy. Finally, it was purchased by film magnate and founder of MGM Studios, Marcus Lowe, who enjoyed the mansion until his own passing in 1927. Lowe was perfect for Pembroke. As the owner of MGM, he had the wealth to maintain such an enormous estate, and as a showman, he appreciated its theatrical grandeur. The estate was passed down to his son Arthur Lowe, but by the 1960s, the costs of maintaining Pembroke had become unsustainable. The post-war era had brought new realities: high property taxes, difficulty finding servants, changing social attitudes. In 1968, Arthur Lowe made the heartbreaking decision to demolish the mansion before marketing the land to developers.
Today, a neighborhood with 46 houses occupies the site where Pembroke once stood, along with the Legend Yacht and Beach Club. If Pembroke had not been torn down, it would still be one of the largest homes in the United States, coming in at 26th place among residential structures. But Pembroke wasn't the only colossal estate in Glen Cove. Just a short yacht ride away stood another magnificent mansion that we must explore: Henry P. Davison's Peacock Point. Peacock Point, the banker's retreat. Henry Pomeroy Davison's story represents a quintessentially American narrative. The self-made man who rises from modest beginnings to the heights of power and wealth through intelligence, hard work, and fortunate connections. Born in 1867 in Troy, Pennsylvania, Henry came from a respectable but not wealthy family. His father was a small-town merchant, comfortable but far from rich. Young Henry was bright and ambitious, but the family couldn't afford to send him to college. This was a serious limitation in an era when higher education was increasingly seen as essential for professional success. At age 18, Henry made a bold decision. He moved to Bridgeport, Connecticut, in search of opportunity. Bridgeport was a bustling industrial city, home to factories and businesses that might offer a young man with drive and intelligence a chance to make something of himself. He found work as a bank clerk, starting at the very bottom of the financial world. But Henry's life changed dramatically due to a chance encounter with one of America's most colorful characters, P.T. Barnum. Yes, that P.T. Barnum, the circus impresario, the showman, the master of publicity and humbug, lived in Bridgeport. Barnum was in his 70s by this time, immensely wealthy and famous, but he remained actively engaged in the community. Somehow, young Henry Davison caught the attention of Barnum. Perhaps they met at a social event, or perhaps Barnum noticed the intelligent young bank clerk when conducting his own financial business. Whatever the circumstances, the two became friends despite the enormous difference in their ages and stations in life.
Barnum saw something special in young Davison: a sharp mind, an ability to read people, a hunger for success. More importantly, Barnum was willing to help. He introduced Davison to some of finance's most influential figures. These introductions proved invaluable. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, personal connections meant everything in the world of banking and finance. You could be the smartest man in the room, but if you didn't know the right people, you'd never get anywhere. Thanks to Barnum's introductions, Davison began moving up in the world of finance. He was hired by larger banks, given more responsibility, and proved himself repeatedly. He became known as someone who understood both the technical side of banking and the personal side: how to read clients, how to structure deals, how to inspire confidence. By the early 1900s, Davison had become president of several banks. But his greatest opportunity came when he caught the attention of J.P. Morgan, the titan of American finance. Morgan, arguably the most powerful banker in the world, needed someone to help manage his vast financial empire. In 1909, Davison became a senior partner at J.P. Morgan and Company.
This position placed Davison at the absolute center of American finance. J.P. Morgan and Company financed railroads, steel companies, electrical utilities, virtually every major industry in America. The bank arranged loans for foreign governments, helped stabilize financial panics, and advised presidents on economic policy. As Morgan's senior partner, Davison wielded enormous influence. Most notably, Davison is remembered today for a secret meeting he attended in November 1910 on Jekyll Island, Georgia. A small group of the nation's most powerful bankers and politicians gathered at a private club to discuss reforming America's banking system. The United States had experienced several financial panics in recent decades, and there was widespread agreement that the country needed a central banking system to provide stability. The meeting at Jekyll Island laid out the framework for what would become the Federal Reserve System, established by Congress in 1913. This is arguably one of the most important financial institutions in world history. Davison played a crucial role in designing and promoting this system. It goes without saying that he made a tremendous amount of money along the way, both from his work at J.P. Morgan and from his own investments. Around 1913-1914, as Davison approached the peak of his career and wealth, he began looking for a site to build his dream house. He wanted something on Long Island's Gold Coast, close enough to Manhattan for easy commuting, but far enough away to feel like a true country retreat. As luck would have it, the Charles Gates mansion in Glen Cove had just burned down. The Gates family had been another wealthy dynasty, but after the fire, they decided to sell the prime lot overlooking Long Island Sound rather than rebuild. The location was spectacular: elevated land with panoramic views across the water, with several acres of mature trees and natural beauty. In 1914, Henry Davidson purchased the property and hired the renowned architectural firm of Walker and Gillette to design a neo-Georgian mansion with a commanding presence. Walker and Gillette were known for their refined, historically inspired designs. They understood how to create homes that felt both grand and livable, both impressive and comfortable. Davidson also hired the Olmsted brothers, the sons of Frederick Law Olmsted, who had designed Central Park, to create a park-like setting to surround his mansion. The Olmsted brothers were the premier landscape architects in America, and their work on Davidson's estate would be among their finest achievements. After 2 long years of construction, filled with countless decisions about materials, finishes, and details, Henley's estate, known as Peacock Point, was completed in 1916. The timing was significant. World War I was raging in Europe, and America would soon be drawn into the conflict. But for now, Davidson could enjoy his magnificent new home. The red brick mansion was dressed in classical elements with ornate balustrade and pediments decorating each level. The style was clearly Georgian, inspired by the architecture of 18th century England and colonial America, but adapted and refined for modern living. Expansive porches allowed Davidson's family to enjoy fresh air along the water, taking advantage of the cooling breezes that came off Long Island Sound on summer evenings. Architectural critics of the day wrote about the mansion with great enthusiasm. One review proclaimed that Peacock Point was ardent, earnest, and spirited, high praise in an era when architectural criticism could be quite harsh. The design managed to be impressive without being pompous, grand without being cold.
As we approach Peacock Point, continuing around the estate's perimeter, we search for the main entrance. The front door is flanked by limestone columns with intricate, delicate relief work, forming vines and flowers to surround the arched opening. These carved details required hundreds of hours of skilled stonework. Each leaf, each petal, each tendril was carved by hand. Swinging open the massive front doors, we arrive in the entrance hall, finished with a geometric marble floor in multiple colors, cream, rose, and gray marble arranged in an intricate pattern. Wood-paneled walls in rich mahogany rise to the ceiling, broken by alcoves where classical sculptures stand on pedestals. At the stair landing, beautifully painted murals are inset into the paneling, perhaps pastoral scenes or classical allegories. Venturing into the dining room, we find the Georgian style has been refined to suit American tastes, blending traditional design with refined but more modern finishes for the time. The walls are painted in a soft sage green or subtle blue-gray. The woodwork is painted white rather than stained dark, creating a lighter, more airy feeling than the heavy Victorian interiors that were already falling out of fashion. Crown molding, chair rails, and baseboards are all meticulously detailed. The dining table, when fully extended, could seat perhaps 18 or 20 guests, large enough for impressive dinner parties, but not so enormous as to feel impersonal. A sideboard along one wall holds silver serving pieces and fine china. Built-in china cabinets with glass doors display the family's collection of porcelain and crystal. The rounded breakfast room continues this playful twist on Georgian style. Where the dining room is formal and rectangular, the breakfast room is intimate and circular, bathed in natural light from a large, multicolored glass dome soaring overhead. This dome is a masterpiece of stained glass work, perhaps depicting flowers, birds, or geometric patterns in soft colors that cast beautiful patterns of light on the walls and floor below. The family would have taken their everyday meals here: breakfast before Henry departed for the city, lunch when he was home, perhaps intimate dinners when they weren't entertaining. The circular shape and the overhead light create a warm, embracing space that would have been a favorite gathering spot. Continuing into the sitting room, despite its large size, we find that it is arranged to be a comfortable retreat. Yes, it boasts expensive artwork and furniture, but it is meant to feel homey and not ostentatious. Sofas and chairs are arranged in conversational groupings. Books and magazines lie casually on side tables. Fresh flowers in vases add color and life. Large windows look out over the grounds and the water beyond. On winter evenings, a fire would crackle in the fireplace, casting warm light and shadows. This was a room for reading, for conversation, for relaxing after dinner, for enjoying family time away from the demands of business and society.
The library continues this trend of livable spaces, with comfortable sofas, large windows providing abundant natural light, and plenty of lamps for reading. Floor-to-ceiling bookcases hold leather-bound volumes, not just for show, but books that were actually read. Davison was known as an intelligent, well-read man who valued education despite not having attended college himself. A large desk would have allowed him to work from home when needed. In an era before computers or even typewriters in most homes, this desk would have been equipped with everything needed for correspondence in business: fine paper, pens and ink, sealing wax, perhaps a telephone, still a relatively new technology in 1916. Henry Davison enjoyed life at Peacock Point, but he also remained deeply engaged in public service. During World War I, which America entered in 1917, Davison took on the enormous task of raising money for the Red Cross. The American Red Cross needed funds to provide medical care, ambulances, bandages, and supplies for wounded soldiers, both American troops and Allied forces. Davison threw himself into this work with characteristic energy and skill. He organized fundraising campaigns, convinced wealthy donors to give generously, and managed the logistics of this massive undertaking. By the end of the war, he had raised approximately $4 million for the Red Cross, an enormous sum, equivalent to perhaps $80 million today. This money saved countless lives and eased immeasurable suffering. Unfortunately, the rest of Henry Davison's life was tragically short. In 1922, at only 55 years old, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. This was an era when neurosurgery was still in its infancy, with limited ability to treat such conditions successfully. Davison underwent surgery to remove the tumor, but complications arose, and he passed away shortly after the operation. His death shocked the financial world and the Gold Coast community. Here was a man in the prime of life, at the peak of his influence and success, cut down suddenly. His funeral was attended by the most powerful bankers, businessmen, and politicians in America. Tributes poured in praising his intelligence, his integrity, and his service to the nation. His wife, Kate Truby Davison, continued living at Peacock Point for nearly 4 more decades. She was a remarkable woman in her own right, active in charitable work, involved in aviation. Her son, Truby Davison, became an early aviator and aviation administrator, and a beloved figure in the Glen Cove community. Kate maintained Peacock Point beautifully throughout her long widowhood. The grounds remained meticulously kept. She entertained regularly, hosting family gatherings, charitable events, and visits from old friends. The house remained a warm, welcoming place rather than becoming a lonely monument to past glory. When Kate passed away in 1961 at an advanced age, the family faced a decision about Peacock Point. And here we see something different from many Gold Coast estates. The Davison family, unlike many families whose wealth was born from the Gilded Age and squandered by subsequent generations, had managed their inheritance wisely. The family continues to own the property 5 generations later, a remarkable achievement. However, the mansion itself was demolished shortly after Kate's passing. This might seem contradictory. Why demolish the house if the family is keeping the land? The answer lies in the practical realities of maintaining such enormous structures. By 1961, the costs of heating, maintaining, and staffing a mansion of Peacock Point's size had become prohibitive even for a wealthy family. Property taxes on such valuable waterfront land had increased dramatically. Finding domestic servants had become nearly impossible. The post-war economy offered better opportunities for working-class Americans than household service. The house itself required constant maintenance. Roofs leaked, plumbing failed, heating systems needed updating, paint faded and cracked.
The library continues this trend of livable spaces, with comfortable sofas, large windows providing abundant natural light, and plenty of lamps for reading. Floor-to-ceiling bookcases hold leather-bound volumes, not just for show, but books that were actually read. Davison was known as an intelligent, well-read man who valued education despite not having attended college himself. A large desk would have allowed him to work from home when needed. In an era before computers or even typewriters in most homes, this desk would have been equipped with everything needed for correspondence in business: fine paper, pens and ink, sealing wax, perhaps a telephone, still a relatively new technology in 1916. Henry Davison enjoyed life at Peacock Point, but he also remained deeply engaged in public service. During World War I, which America entered in 1917, Davison took on the enormous task of raising money for the Red Cross. The American Red Cross needed funds to provide medical care, ambulances, bandages, and supplies for wounded soldiers, both American troops and Allied forces. Davison threw himself into this work with characteristic energy and skill. He organized fundraising campaigns, convinced wealthy donors to give generously, and managed the logistics of this massive undertaking. By the end of the war, he had raised approximately $4 million for the Red Cross, an enormous sum, equivalent to perhaps $80 million today. This money saved countless lives and eased immeasurable suffering. It seemed contradictory. Why demolish the house if the family is keeping the land? The answer lies in the practical realities of maintaining such enormous structures. By 1961, the costs of heating, maintaining, and staffing a mansion of Peacock Point's size had become prohibitive even for a wealthy family. Property taxes on such valuable waterfront land had increased dramatically. Finding domestic servants had become nearly impossible. The post-war economy offered better opportunities for working-class Americans than household service. The house itself required constant maintenance. Roofs leaked, plumbing failed, heating systems needed updating, paint faded and cracked. Knollwood, the king's refuge. For as palatial as some of these homes have been, our next mansion was actually owned by royalty. We're going to Muttontown now to explore one of the most unusual and tragic stories of the Gold Coast, King Zog's Knollwood. Charles Hudson, a Wall Street titan, originally built the 60-room mansion around 1912. Hudson had made his fortune in finance and investing, and like so many of his contemporaries, he wanted a country estate that reflected his success. Knollwood was substantial and impressive, with all the amenities expected of a Gold Coast mansion: elaborate gardens, outbuildings, stables, and stunning architecture. But Knollwood's most notorious resident was neither a captain of industry nor even an American. His name was Ahmet Muhtar Bey Zagoli, better known to the world as King Zog of Albania. His story is so extraordinary, so filled with drama and intrigue, that it's worth telling in detail. Born in 1995 in the mountains of what was then the Ottoman Empire, Ahmet Zagoli came from a prominent Muslim Albanian family. His father was a local chieftain, and young Ahmet grew up in a world of tribal politics, blood feuds, and shifting alliances. Albania at the time was forging its identity in the aftermath of the Ottoman Empire's collapse and the chaos of the First World War. The Balkans in this period were incredibly unstable. The Ottoman Empire had controlled the region for centuries, but by the early 1900s, Ottoman power was crumbling. Various ethnic and national groups were fighting for independence and territory. Albania declared independence in 1912, but this was just the beginning of decades of turmoil.
Ahmet Zagoli, who later shortened his name to the more dramatic Zog, was driven by fierce ambition from a young age. He was intelligent, ruthless, and opportunistic. He understood that in Albania's chaotic political environment, power would go to whoever could be the most cunning and decisive. He entered politics as a young man and rose with whirlwind speed. By his mid-20s, he had become one of Albania's most influential politicians. In 1922, at the age of 27, he became Albania's prime minister, the youngest person to hold that position. 3 years later, in 1925, he maneuvered himself into the position of president. But Zog wasn't satisfied with being president. He wanted to be king. In 1928, in a move that shocked Europe, he dismantled Albania's democracy and proclaimed himself King Zog I. He quite literally crowned himself in a lavish ceremony, creating an instant monarchy in a country that had never had one before. As king, Zog ruled Albania with an iron fist. He survived multiple assassination attempts, by some accounts, more than 50 attempts on his life. He famously carried a pistol at all times and once shot back at assassins during an attempt at the Vienna Opera House. He was a chain smoker who reportedly consumed 200 cigarettes per day. He lived in constant fear, but also in considerable luxury. When World War II broke out and Italy invaded Albania in 1939, Zog was forced to flee. He had seen the invasion coming and had prepared for this moment. Here's where the story takes an even more remarkable turn. Zog plundered Albania's treasury before fleeing. He and his entourage loaded trucks and cars with an untold amount of gold, jewels, artwork, and currency. Essentially everything valuable they could carry from the Albanian national treasury. The exact amount has never been determined, but estimates suggest it could have been worth tens of millions of dollars or more. Zog literally stole his country's wealth and took it with him into exile. He and his family, including his wife Queen Geraldine, an American woman he had married in 1938, fled first to Greece, then to France, then to England as the war progressed. After the war, when Albania fell under communist control, Zog knew he could never return. He spent years moving around Europe, living in hotels and rented houses, always with his treasure, always plotting an impossible return to power that would never come. By 1951, Zog decided to purchase a permanent residence in the United States. He wanted something grand, befitting his royal status and remote enough to provide security. When Knollwood in Muttontown came on the market, it seemed perfect. The 60-room mansion on extensive acreage offered the space and privacy he needed. Remarkably, Zog purchased it sight unseen. He never actually visited the property before buying it. He sent his men ahead to prepare the estate for his arrival, envisioning a royal enclave where Albanian exiles could gather, where he could hold court like a monarch in waiting, and where he could live out his years in the style to which he had become accustomed. Almost immediately, rumors began to spread about hidden treasures in the mansion. People whispered about gems embedded in the walls, about safes full of gold coins hidden in secret rooms, about artwork worth fortunes stuffed in closets or hidden behind false panels. These weren't entirely baseless rumors. Zog had fled Albania with enormous wealth, and he had to keep it somewhere. Local treasure hunters became obsessed with Knollwood. People began trespassing on the property, breaking into the mansion, searching for Zog's treasure. The damage they caused was catastrophic. They smashed into plaster walls with sledgehammers, looking for hidden safes. They pried away woodwork and paneling. They tore up floors. They left the estate in shambles.
And if anyone ever found the treasure, no one has said a word to this day. Either the treasure hunters found nothing, perhaps Zog kept his wealth in bank vaults rather than hidden in the house, or whoever found it wisely kept quiet about their discovery to avoid legal complications. What we do know is that King Zog never actually settled at Knollwood.
bureaucratic hurdles prevented him from getting the necessary visas and immigration permissions. He also suffered from ill health, decades of chain smoking, and the stress of multiple assassination attempts and years in exile had taken their toll. He remained in Europe, living in hotels in France and England, while Knollwood sat largely empty. Eventually, concerns about security and the ongoing vandalism led to a drastic decision. In the mid-1950s, Knollwood was demolished. The mansion was torn down, partly to end the treasure-hunting madness, partly because it was becoming derelict, and partly because the costs of maintaining an empty mansion were prohibitive. All that's left today are eerie remnants, perhaps a gatepost or a section of wall or a crumbling foundation, and swirling legends of secret riches. Did Zog's treasure exist? If so, where is it now? Was it found by treasure hunters? Did Zog or his family retrieve it? Is it still hidden somewhere, waiting to be discovered? These questions remain unanswered. King Zog died in France in 1961 at the age of 65, never having returned to Albania and never having lived in his Long Island mansion. His son, Leka, claimed the Albanian throne in exile, but never ruled. The Zog dynasty, which had lasted only 11 years in Albania, 1928 to 1939, ended with a whimper rather than the bang with which it had begun. Knollwood's story reminds us that the Gold Coast mansions weren't just symbols of American industrial wealth. They also attracted international figures, exiled aristocrats, and colorful characters from around the world. The mix of American millionaires and European nobility gave Long Island society a cosmopolitan flair that was unique in American life. Upon his father's death, Clarence Mackay inherited not just a vast fortune, but also a legacy of ambition and influence. John Mackay had always been something of an outsider in New York society. He was Irish Catholic, a self-made Westerner, not quite accepted by the old money Protestant establishment. Clarence was determined to cement his family's place among America's elite in a way his father never quite achieved.